welcome to Singapore Computer Society Women in Tech's International Women's Day 2025 podcast, which is a podcast celebrating and empowering women who work in Singapore's technology industry in commemoration of the theme of International Women's Day 2025, which is Accelerate Action. I am your host, Amanda, one of the EXCO members of Singapore Computer Society's Women in Tech chapter myself. So this is episode 3 of the podcast, which with each episode featuring a female leader with unique insights on what it means to succeed as a professional woman in the technology space, with the aim of inspiring fellow women in tech and encouraging allies to play a part in making the technology industry in Singapore inclusive and vibrant. So, in episode 3, our guest is Anthea Ong, who is currently a strategic advisor at Intellect, and she's also a former parliamentarian, among many other things. Today, we'll be sharing a spotlight on the topic of mental health and well-being. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Anthea, who I'd like to invite to do a quick intro of herself.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. It's always challenging, when you have been around the block for a while, to try to introduce yourself when you've had the opportunity to do so many things. I think I would simply put it as what many people like to call me, other than my former nominated member of parliament had. Many like to call me a social entrepreneur, a coach, and also an author.
I'd like to call you an inspiration.
Thank you. I actually also sometimes joke, Amanda, that a better way to call myself is a full-time human being and part-time doing everything else. And so we are all many hatters anyway, but ultimately we're all trying to be full-time humans, right?
So true. Yeah. So I guess with that, we'll launch into the topic questions for today.
Sure.
So firstly, you really do have a very long and illustrious career that spans many different roles. You've assumed leadership positions at multinational financial institutions. You've even been a managing director at a consulting group, been a startup founder for an education and technology consultancy, and like you mentioned, you're a former nominated parliamentarian. So how did you manage to cope with the stress of adapting to new roles as you entered new roles? And since these distinct roles would have very different demands.
Yeah, thank you for putting it that way. It's quite interesting when you kind of look back on your own journey and don't realize, the different points of diversity, because you kind of, go through them, and only when you look back, you kind of connect the dots. How did I? I have to say, first and foremost, that it was only 20 years ago when I had my own personal brush with depression, with a confluence of life events that really took me to, a really challenging place, that I was more conscious. But if I sort of saw that as the watershed moment or the inflection point for my life, I think before that, I was clearly one, and I think a lot of this actually stays with me, meaning that I show up. I am also naturally curious, adventurous. And so with those traits, I think new things, new roles, new environments, even new countries, which I have lived overseas in more than a few places, actually did not come across so much as stress, as just, part of exploration and discovery. So I thank my parents for that, but I also thank my cosmic luck for that, right? To have all of that natural traits. But after the inflection point where I have done a lot more work, understanding myself, and also being more conscious, I think the one common strand when I look back, Amanda, I would say is I was very clear with each place and each station of life I showed up. I embraced my agency. I would always have this sense of I'm choosing to be here, right? Even if I get sort of like assigned somewhere else or whatever. I mean, if I really don't like to, I can say no. But most of the time, I actually not just show up for it, but I sometimes put my hand out for it, right? So I think just that agency helped. And then I think in the time that I've become a coach, and also sort of not just about my own experience, but looking at the CEOs and leaders that I've had the opportunity to support, I would actually group some of what I've learned into 3 things. The first is that I realized I have a little bit of a knack in not just managing time, but I'm actually quite good in managing energy, right? Because I have a natural sense of how is my level of energy. And if I feel it's going low, then I'll make sure I do something to prop it up, right? And so now increasingly we're calling this, you must know your energy feelers and killers. And if you look at my calendar is like a Picasso painting, right? Like today, this chat, I think it's going to be energy filling. So after this, I actually will be great. I can, do things that I'm challenging, which I am. I'm going to a challenging, meeting with one of my teams. So it's very important to manage energy and not just time, because time is finite, energy is renewable. Right. So that's really important, individual level, but also at the team level, if you ask me, especially if you are leading a team, right? Understand the energy of the team. So that's one. The second would be that for me, I think from young, but thankfully that really also helped me through my most challenging time, because it literally saved me, is gratitude, right? And that sense of gratitude allows us to always be centered into what we have, not what we don't have. And if we keep being in a place where we don't have, then you're not very creative. You don't have a lot of agency. You don't feel very safe, right? So I think part of that is also because, of my parents, because of the good fortune I've had. And then, of course, like I said, it was really gratitude that saved me when I lost so much at one fell swoop. It was actually thinking about what I still had that really saved me from actually going into an unsafe place, to be honest. So gratitude would be one. And the third would be ownership, which I mentioned earlier. And that ownership comes with it also, the choice that we make, right? To make conscious choices. In Singapore, we like to say, bo bian, no choice, no choice. We don't realize that when we say bo bian, no choice, you are actually making a choice to give up your agency, right? And just imagine the kind of energy that comes out when you say, I have no choice, I have to go and pick up my kid after work, compared to, I am choosing to pick up my kid after work because I want to spend some time with him or her in the car, and acknowledging that, yeah, it's a bit big stretch for you, but you don't use words like bo bian, because then it just overwhelms. And so in short, I would just sum it up to, actually it stands for ego. EGO. It took me a while, no? I knew these 3 things, but it took me a while to come to these 3 letters. So E means manage energy, G means practice gratitude, and O means take ownership. Prioritize your life. We will always have competing goals in life and the different demands of life, but to own it, to know you have agency, to know you have choices, yeah, that really helps. That's what ownership is all about.
Yeah, I think those 3 pieces of advice are wonderful pieces of advice, and they're so easy to remember because you have an acronym for it, right? Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway that our listeners can come away with after listening to the podcast. Thank you. So I'll move on to the next question.
Sure.
I noted that you're currently a strategic advisor at Intellect. And I know Intellect is an online mental health platform that actually allows its users to seek coaching and counseling. So it is in the mental health tech space. I know a lot of people actually use this app, and they're very familiar with the application itself. So I thought, you are definitely uniquely qualified to answer this question. How can technology be used to improve our mental health and well-being? And also, this is a 2-parter. So what ways can technology also harm our mental health and well-being?
It's such a great question, Amanda. And it's so current, it's so relevant, right? So on point. And really, really a big part of mental health discourse actually right now. And it cuts across all levels, right? Whether it's at an individual level all the way to policymakers. we need to think about the role of technology, right? When we talked about mental health. So the first part of your question, and actually I was on a panel discussion recently, and we discussed this. One of the things that I would like to say in terms of how can technology help us, clearly is making it accessible, affordable. And that two A's are very important, because for the longest time, with something like stigma associated with mental health, with also the situation with mental health professionals, where we do have a shortage, right? Particularly in the public healthcare system. It very often meant that, with stigma, you already don't want to come forward. I remember when I went to see a psychiatrist 20 years ago, I was just dripping and drowning in internalized shame, right? And this is 20 years ago, where even if you have people around you, your family and friends who are very open and wanting to support you, you yourself give yourself such a hard time, right? So I think technology allows us to have that access where I think my shame was exacerbated because I was in the public healthcare hospital, right? In that department, I was actually in a mental health hospital, the Adam Road Hospital, which is very clearly for psychiatric, services. So yeah, I think that part of it, accessibility, affordability, and clearly the safety of it, right? Safety meaning non-stigmatized, because I will go to your second part of your question. So I better clarify what I meant by safety. The first part of technology being supportive of mental health, support, right, that is needed is accessibility, affordability, and also being in a less or even a destigmatized environment, right? And I think that's really helpful because it gets more people to come forward. And as with any challenges in life, including any health conditions, the earlier you come forward, which is what happened to me, the fuller, the more complete your recovery, right? And in fact, you might even learn so much from it that like me, you actually expand, as a person. So yeah, I definitely would encourage everybody to come forward. And so Intellect is one of this, technology that's available. I also do want to say, going now to the second part of your question, I'm conscious of the time, is that as technology is trying to become more human with AI and machine learning, let's make sure we don't become less human ourselves. Right? So in other words, as much as there is a lot of strength and benefit to be had with technology coming in to support mental health, challenges, across the different segments of our population, please don't forget that we're ultimately still human. The social connection, the face-to-face support, having social connections with each other in terms of having a meal, having time. I shared earlier about, as much as it's a challenge, see it not as a duty that you have to pick up your kid, for example, in your very busy day, but that, hey, even that 10 minutes, it can be quality time, right, that you have with your child by picking him or her up. That's an example. So yeah, I think my concern about technology, there's always a danger with us in this modern world we live in, to outsource all our ills to technology and say it's going to be a silver bullet and a magic pill that will solve everything. It does not. A big part of the risk of technology is also that it can be a cause for mental health challenges. In particular, our young, but also increasingly, I'm hearing of elderly being addicted because they don't have anything else to do. They're lonely, right? Especially if they we've talked about my mom earlier, she's losing a bit of a strength in her leg, so she doesn't go out and socialize as much anymore. Then they just spend all their time on YouTube, and that's not, that's not a good thing, because that's not how we are wired.
Right.
Wired to have social connections, like in-person social connection. So I think that is important. Don't become less human as technology becomes more human. We have to always stay ahead of technology, and technology is but a supportive tool. It cannot be the panacea, our mental well-being.
That is such a powerful message, and I really love that you shared that with us today.
Thank you.
So I'm also conscious of the time, so I'll wrap up.
Yeah, please.
All right, listeners, that was Anthea Ong. Today we talked about mental health and well-being with her, and I think we've come away with some really fantastic learnings. Let's remember her 3 pieces of advice of managing energy, showing gratitude, and taking ownership of your time. And let's also remember how she has given us insight on the benefits of technology for mental health and the harm that that technology can cause on our mental health. So with that, we hope you have been inspired by our guest. I know I have been. And we hope to see you for the next episode. Thank you for listening.